Hello and welcome to this tutorial for AeroToy 0.1. This is the first release of AeroToy. It was released a couple of days ago, so I thought now would be a good time to put out a short tutorial on how to build a simple aircraft. This is the view that you'll see when you start AeroToy. This is the editor view, and this is the scene that we will build our craft in. So let's start by choosing an aerofoil from the part browser. I'm going to start by picking one of these Bezier-defined aerofoils. You'll notice straight away that we have a fluid simulation running already. There are speed controls here where we can set the simulation to slow, medium, or fast. We can turn on a force vector and lift over drag annotation, so we can see how these values are affected by changes to the wing. Also in the visualization pane you can see a drop-down list, which we can use to choose a visualization mode. This view is showing the airflow velocity. The arrows represent the direction of flow and the colour indicates the magnitude. The grey area here represents slower airflow, and you can just see a small patch of grey on the leading edge of the wing as well, where the airflow is slower. There is also a pressure view, where red represents high pressure and blue represents low pressure. And there's an isobars view as well, showing the same information in a slightly different way. But let's stick to the smoke lines for now. I'll turn the annotations off as well, just to keep things simple. This is a Bezier-defined shape, so we could use the Bezier editor to change the shape of the wing if we wanted to. I can just move a node around, maybe add a node, but we won't do that for this tutorial. Let's just keep the standard wing shape. Now I'm going to draw your attention to the tree structure over here. We've got a couple of nodes already. This white node represents a rigid body. Let's rename that to aircraft, since it represents the main body of the aircraft. The yellow node beneath it is our Bezier wing, which we just added. And I'm just going to move this so that it's on the origin of the rigid body, just to keep things simple. Now let's add another wing to the same rigid body. I'm going to add another copy of the Bezier wing. Let's place it above the first one. And if we select the first one, we can see its attributes in this pane here. And I'm going to copy the rotation from this one and paste it onto the second one, just to keep them pointing the same way. So now both of these nodes are part of the same rigid body node, which means that if we were to go into a test flight now, I'm going to choose an empty scene and fire that up. We'll see that the two wings move together. As far as the simulation is concerned, they're part of the same rigid body. It's as if there are invisible struts holding them together. This is not super interesting yet, so let's go back to the editor. If we want to build an aircraft, we're going to need a way to pitch the aircraft up and down. We're going to need an elevator. Of course, the elevator needs to move independently of the main wings, so we need a separate rigid body. First, I'm just going to move the aircraft over to the right to make some room. We can add a rigid body by adding a joint. Let's select a servo motor joint and place this at the rear of the aircraft. This triangle represents the pivot point that our elevator will rotate around. Let's rename this node as elevator to keep things clear. We need to add a shape to the elevator, and we could use another Bezier-defined wing, but I'm just going to paint a line like this. So that can be our elevator. We'll use that to control the pitch of our aircraft. Now we're going to take off from a runway, so let's set the environment back to flat, and we're going to need some wheels to move along the runway. Now, before adding any components like wheels to a rigid body, make sure that you have the correct rigid body selected. If I were to add them now, I would be adding wheels to the elevator, and they would be part of the elevator rigid body and moving with the elevator, and we don't want that. We don't want the wheels to pivot around this point here. We want them to be rigidly connected to the aircraft body. So we'll select the aircraft node and add a couple of wheels. You've probably noticed by now that there is a black and white icon here, which indicates the center of mass of the aircraft. You can see as we move the new wheel around, the center of mass moves as well. I'm obviously going to place the new wheel behind the center of mass so that our aircraft doesn't immediately fall over. Now, if we go back into the test scene, I can use A and D on the keyboard to control the elevator. You can see a summary of the controls in the bottom right of the window here. It's A and D to control the elevator, and I can hold Shift to make larger movements. So, great, we've got an elevator, but now we just need a way to get the aircraft moving forwards. We could just use the ramp scene to test on and wait for the aircraft to pick up speed, rolling down the hill and then try to take off. But for this tutorial, I'm going to use an engine. So let's place an engine between our two main wings, and I'm going to copy the rotation from our wings again to keep everything pointing in the same direction. There we go. Right, so let's go back to the test flight. I'm setting this back to the flat scene. Okay, let's throttle up, and we're moving forwards, and we've got a little bit of a problem there. The elevator is generating too much lift and it's tipping the whole aircraft forwards, which we don't want. So we can fix that by rotating our elevator. I've selected the elevator and I'm just going to drag in this rotation edit field to rotate it so that it's a bit more level. We probably also want to move it a bit so that it's not in the path of the engine exhaust. That's better. Okay, let's try again. I'm applying a little bit of throttle to get us moving forwards. And pitching up, and we're off the ground. Good, we're still climbing. And there's a bit of instability. Yep, and yeah. I've lost control of the aircraft. So, some stability problems there. And that's because we've got the centre of mass of the aircraft too far back. Aircraft are much more stable when the centre of mass is forward of the centre of lift of the wing. We can't see the centre of lift directly here, but it's probably somewhere around the centre of the wing. So we can move that forward by adding some ballast. So I'm going to select ballast from the part browser. I'm going to take the medium weight ballast and put it in front of the engine just here. I'm putting it in front of the engine because I don't want the thrust from the engine to be creating a torque around the centre of mass, which is just here. And doing that has moved the centre of mass of the whole aircraft forward, so that should have improved the stability overall. So let's try again. I'm throttling up and I'm using the elevator to lift up the nose. Okay, I'm off the ground. I'm continuing to climb. Feels good so far. Yeah, we're much more stable now. The aircraft is wanting to pitch up, so I'm going to apply some trim. Trim is a way of adjusting the neutral position of the elevator. The Q and E keys can be used to control the trim. So I'm going to apply a little bit of trim to pitch down. Maybe too much. I should be able to trim the aircraft so that it stays roughly level without me applying any input. Okay, that feels about right. So you can see in the avionics window I've got about 0.8 degrees of trim, and without any input it's now staying roughly level. Okay, so now let's throttle down the aircraft and see if we can get into a stall. I'm just going to pop out the avionics window, put it a bit more convenient. The airspeed is dropping, we're still climbing. And yep, you can see we're starting to get a stall on the upper wing. I don't really have any control anymore. And we're stalled on the lower wing as well. But we've got that centre of mass nicely far forward at the front of the aircraft, so we're naturally pitching down into a dive. Airspeed is picking back up and we've got control again. So let's put the engine back on again and we'll see if we can get a nice landing here. So now down to below 500 units of altitude. Airspeed is down at 160 units per second. There's the ground, and I'm just going to pitch up a bit more to try to get that nose up, and we're down. Okay, and that concludes this tutorial. Thank you for watching.